have about 15 minutes, so that's a little bit of time to touch on a topic. I'll have to edit a little bit. On Monday, I went down to our TV room to see what was going on. It was around midday, and my husband, my partner, was watching TV. He was watching the inauguration with the cat and dog. They were there with him. And the dog it was kind of a funny tableau. I didn't stop to watch with them. The dog was uncharacteristically facing sort of the opposite direction on her cushion, so she was facing away from the television. And she had sort of a pained expression on her face. And I said, yeah, I get you, just because of where my beliefs lie. And then the cat was sitting on his lap, facing towards the television. And she was purring and content and had like one of those cat smiles on her face. I was like, oh my God, that's your guy. I didn't know. Of course, I was making that all up in my head. And what I was really thinking about was thinking about how they represent, these different people in our lives. Because we do have a lot of friends and family who lie on both sides of the political situation in our country. And I think a lot of us do. And, it's a lot different than when I was younger. I mean, I think we all feel this. There's a difference to it. There's an intensity to things. So I was reading this week in the Wall Street Journal, there was this article, which I wanted to share a brief quote with you from. There was a really excellent article on this idea of cancel culture, which goes hand in hand with the idea of having two sides of an issue that feel irreconcilable to the extent that the person in question needs to be removed. Right? It's intolerable to even to have that person be in existence, and so we cancel them and they disappear. And, obviously, sometimes it's really good. People should be taken to task for misdeeds. But, it definitely was it even had a name, cancel culture, because it was so easy to just obliterate the people we dislike or we disagree with. Anyway, the quote that this man from a think tank shared was really interesting to me. And it made me think about things, obviously from the Buddhist perspective, but I'll read this quote first. It's talking about how we, the cancel culture has generally been driven by one side of the political arena, and now it's moving to a different side. And he writes, the original sin of cancel culture does not rest with a single ideology or group, but rather with our species' hardwired tendencies towards tribal behavior and the self-righteous urge to punish outgroups who transgress our taboos. That is, the desire to stamp out our ideological opponents or the inconvenient contrarian. We've heard that. I'm sure you've read countless articles on that. But when I read that, it reminded me of the one of the Buddha's teachings that I find very comforting, very helpful. Because I think what I'm trying to say is I get very upset, and I say that's wrong and that shouldn't be this way. But the Buddha has a very helpful teaching that can shed some light and that can help us reframe our thinking and move us on the path towards alleviating suffering in ourselves and in others. Because after all, that's what we are working towards, right? That's what we want. So this sutta is called the Citta Sutta. It's also known as various sectarians. And it's a little bit of a story within a story. So I'm not going to read the actual sutta. I'm going to paraphrase it for you. So one day, the Buddha was visiting near Savatthi in a monastery. And at that time, there were these various wanderers and contemplatives who were living around there, and they had these different groups, had different opinions, different views, different beliefs, and they were arguing about it. And they were arguing about issues of Dharma. So the cosmos is finite, the cosmos is infinite. The soul and the body are the same, the soul and body are different. Only this is true, anything else is worthless, like that. They were contemplative, so they were discussing spiritual issues. And they lived arguing, quarreling, disputing, wounding one another with verbal darts. It's like this, it's not like that. It's not like that, it's like this. So it was problematic, and they decided to go to the Buddha and see if he could sort it out for them. So they came to him and told him their problem, and the Buddha said to them, he shared this story with them to help. He said, monks, these contemplative wanderers are blind and eyeless. They don't know what is beneficial and what is harmful. Not knowing what is beneficial and what is harmful, they live arguing, quarreling, disputing, and wounding one another with verbal darts. He said, I want to share with you a story. There once was a king who lived near here, and he said to a certain man, sorry, I'm paraphrasing, I lost my place a little bit. The king said, round up all the people in Savatthi who have been blind from birth and bring them to me. So this man brought all the people in Savatthi who were blind from birth to him. And the king said, very well, show these blind people an elephant. So the man replied, he showed the blind people the elephant. And he showed each blind person a different portion of the elephant, saying, this blind people is what an elephant is. So to some of them, he showed an ear or a tusk or the trunk or the foot, the tail, etc., etc. And he says, this is what an elephant is. Having shown the blind people the elephant, the man went to the king and said, the blind people have seen the elephant. And the king said to the blind people, so tell me what the elephant is like. The blind people who'd been shown the head of the elephant said, Your Majesty, the elephant is like a water jar. Those who had been shown the tusk said, Your Majesty, the elephant is like an iron rod. Those who have been shown the tail replied, The elephant, Your Majesty, is like a broom. Those who had been shown the foot said, "Your Majesty, an elephant is like a post." And they argued and quarreled with one another and struck one another with fists. This apparently gratified the king. The king liked to see all this fighting. But the Buddha said, in the same way, monks, these contemplative wanderers are blind and eyeless. They don't know what's beneficial and what's harmful. Not knowing what is beneficial and what is harmful, they live arguing, quarreling, and disputing, wounding each other with verbal darts. On realizing the significance, the Buddha said, some people are deeply attached to their own views. People who only see one side of things engage in quarrels and disputes. This is a famous parable from the Buddha. And it's very helpful to pause and to understand that even if we see, even if we know, even if we've been given access to 12 different parts of the elephant and we have a very deep knowledge of what this elephant is, there's a lot more to the elephant that we don't have access to, we don't have knowledge of, and that other people who are touching the other side of the elephant do have access to. And even when I know in my heart of hearts that I'm right about something, I just know it in my bones. There's something on the other side that I don't actually know, like I can't be sure. And so what do you do with this? How do you, it leaves a lot of uncertainty and it leaves a lot of ambiguity, and that's not how we feel safe. That's not how we navigate well. So how do we navigate well? And the Buddha had a recipe for us that is infinitely helpful and wise. We're asked to examine our thoughts, our speech, and our actions, and to ask ourselves if our thoughts, our speech, and our actions alleviate suffering in ourselves and in others. When we talk about right speech, there's this recipe. Is it true and is it helpful? If you can check those two boxes, it's okay to say it to someone, right? If it's true, you know it's true, and it's helpful. It might be true, and it might not be helpful. That's when you should put up your internal stop sign. It might be helpful and not true. That doesn't work either. If it's true and it's helpful. And I would say that we take this further, not just to speaking with others, but when we engage with ourselves on the day-to-day, when we have an internal dialogue with ourselves. Probably a lot of times we know we're like, yeah, it's true. Is it helpful? Is this dialogue that I'm having right now, this running dialogue, is this helpful? And if it's not helpful, it's not skillful. And that's where we learn to engage skillful effort and turn our attention to something that is not harmful, something that is supportive.